Honours in Australia is so incredibly competitive. There are almost 1,000 first year students, so by the time you get to third year there's about 300, and then by the time you get to honours it's 80, and the cohort through masters only gets smaller and smaller. So the first tip is to apply absolutely everywhere. I think this was probably the most helpful tip that I can give to anyone who is interested in doing honours. So it's probably the biggest mistake that I see students making, and to be honest, I can see why they make it. A lot of universities will tend to prioritise internal university students. So if you're a student at a university, you have a good chance of being accepted there if your grades are decent. So my problem with this is that you don't really know how competitive your cohort is, how many spots are going to accept that year, if the cutoff is going to change this year, or if you're going to get a bad grade on an exam or an assignment. So there were 300 students when I was doing my psychology education, and from that 300, the top 80 got into the honours program. So that's 26%. That's not a chance that I'm willing to take, considering that the stakes are so high. To be a psychologist in Australia, you need to complete an accredited 4th year program, which is an honours year or something equivalent to that. So without that, you can't really progress any further towards being a general psychologist or a clinical psychologist. So if you apply to multiple universities, it gives you that backup option so that you can have some security, and you can go to bed knowing that even if you don't go to the university that you're currently going to now, you will have other options lined up if you don't make it in. So I think this is great during COVID because more and more universities are actually deciding to start online, completely 100% online programs. So I've seen honours programs that are completely online, don't require any face-to-face interaction. So there's more and more universities across different states which you can apply to. I cannot stress that enough. Apply absolutely everywhere. This is something that ended up saving me because I didn't end up getting into the university that I was studying at. So I was at the University of Sydney and I had applied to I think 7 other universities. So I got into 3. I got into Deakin University, I got into Monash University, and I got into University of Newcastle. I ended up picking University of Newcastle because it was the only face-to-face option. I'm glad that I applied to multiple universities because this meant that I could actually sort through the different programs and look at the pros and cons. I didn't end up being stuck with one program. I had some choice. Apply absolutely everywhere. The second tip that I have is maximize your grades. So when I was applying for my honours program, they gave all students a cutoff, like a convention figure of around 75. So they told us to aim for around 75 and we should get in, but that's not to be confused with thinking that 75 is the mark that you need to get in. What they do with honours is they take the top 80 students regardless of the mark that they have. So while people who get a mark of 75 can typically get into honours, it is no way a guarantee that you will have a spot waiting for you. If the 80th person scored 78, then your 75 is going to get you in. They take the top 20% of students typically. So I would recommend to score as high as you can. When I started at the gym, there was this really cheesy saying that was on the wall, and it was something like, aim for the moon because if you fall, you'll land in the stars. And I think it's a way of saying aim higher than what you want. So I applied that mentality while I was doing my graduate diploma, working my way towards my honours year. I tried to get 100 for everything, and I genuinely attempted to do that. And I noticed that when I made that mindset shift that my grades improved a lot, because then when I missed the mark, which is sometimes inevitable, when I missed the mark, I still ended up getting within the 75 to 85 range because I've been trying to get every single mark that I can get my hands on. Whereas I've noticed in the past where if I aim for 75, say the cutoff mark that most people need, and I end up missing the mark, then I usually end up getting anywhere between 65 and 70 if I mess up. So I think it's always better to aim higher. That way, if you get something wrong or you mess up, because of all that extra effort you put in, you'll most likely have a higher GPA or a WAM like weighted average mark, whatever your uni uses to determine who's a top student. So the last tip that I have is something that kept me really motivated throughout the year, and that is to create a spreadsheet. So when you're applying for honours, what is under control is the way that you write out your preferences, your grades, the date you submit. The application process is generally under your control. But what isn't under your control is the amount of students at your university, the amount of students who decide to apply, the grades of the other students, the assignments that you're given, the way the teachers grade, and so many more things. So honours can be quite overwhelming because it can seem like there are a lot of things that are out of your control. So something that I found is creating a spreadsheet of all different universities that offers honours, as well as their closing date, their mark they needed, any criteria, any additional documents they need. It can help give you this sense of control, this sense of accountability. So I've noticed that using this method, you can very easily track and manage where you are in the application process, what you've heard, who you've heard from, and what's going on. So it can be really tricky sometimes because different universities might have different methods of applying. Sometimes you apply straight to the university, sometimes you have to go through a different portal site. So creating a spreadsheet helps you see everything at once and just really gives you that sense of, accountability back, and it really makes you feel like you're actually working towards something because you can see it spread out in front of you, and it's not this abstract thing in your head like applying to all these universities. Like, it seems a lot more concrete when it's in front of you. So those were the 3 practical tips that I enacted to help me get into honours. I think it was really important for me to give out practical tips because every time that I would try and Google, how to get into honours and practical tips to help me along the way, I found sometimes really weird shit that I didn't feel was relevant. Like, sometimes there would be blogs that would say, create a meditation routine. And I understand it, when you're relaxed and in a calm state of mind, you might be able to produce a more like a higher mark. You might be able to, handle the stress of the academic life a bit easier. But it doesn't really feel that practical, and it feels very drawn out from the goal. Like, you definitely need supporting habits to help you in your goal, but I wasn't really interested in those little habits of drink celery juice to give you energy so you can do your assignments. I wanted practical tips, and this is something that I wish that I had. And whenever anyone asks me about getting into honours, this is something that I tell them all, and this is something that I've seen. I've seen a lot of people miss out, a lot of really smart people miss out on opportunities because they only applied to one university. I've seen a lot of people feel really overwhelmed by the stress, and that has impacted their grades. And it's a complicated thing. There are a lot of things that go on behind the scenes when you're applying for honours and then postgrad applications. But if you can think about the practical tips, that can really help keep you grounded, and I hope you can get into honours. These are my 3 tips. Good luck.